We're looking at the tools and practices for third-party design review. We'll look at the review library and the policy, and look at versioning and moving files around and file markup tools. Now, under the general libraries is the review comments library. This is the one library that reviewers have access to. Reviewers provide feedback through the review comment spreadsheet or a marked up PDF or a Word document and pass that on to DOT. DOT then makes it their own and passes it on to the designer. There is no direct contact between the reviewer or the designer unless DOT is involved in that activity. The reviewer has contribute access to the review comments library. The reviewer has read access everywhere else in the project. Everyone else in the project except DOT staff have read approved access to the review comments library. What that means is that anything that the reviewer puts in the library has to be approved by DOT before it is exposed to the rest of the world. The designer produces the materials and informs DOT when they are ready to be reviewed. Once they do that, they wait for feedback to come through from DOT. If they get feedback, they can go to the review comments library, see what DOT has passed on to them. If they wish to respond to the comments, they have to move the files out of the review comments library into their discipline library or into their workstation, make the necessary review comments, and then make them available in the discipline library for DOT to then flag for the reviewer or DOT to look at. The designer has control over the files in their own library as far as the state is concerned. When they want them to be submitted, set the state to submitted, they can set it to in review when they are responding, or they can set it to draft when they're responding. Any responses passed back have to be either emailed or placed in the Precon library so that somebody else can pick them up and move them into the review comments library, or the reviewer can see them in the discipline library. When all comments are resolved, the file state can be set to final by DOT or by the designer. Keep in mind the reviewer doesn't have any access to do that inside the discipline library. The reviewer is notified by DOT that content is ready to be reviewed. One way that they can tell that it's ready to be reviewed is if the designer has set the value of the state for that file to be submitted. Any work that the reviewer does has to be done in the review comments library, so that means that they either create a spreadsheet or Excel document of review comments, or they copy a file that they're going to mark up into the review comments library in order to mark it up. When they are ready to pass that back to DOT, they let DOT know. They can pass links, or they can send it, let DOT know that it's sitting out there and DOT can pick it up. The one library that has very few properties to set is the review comments library. There's really only one field in the review comments library to fill in, and that is the review scope. And that is defined either by DOT in concert with the reviewer or declared by DOT. And that is the one way you can bundle your review comments together, as far as by setting the same scope in all of the files that may be passed through in a batch. DOT then looks at the review comments and sets the review comment value to either approved or rejected. DOT does have the right and the ability to edit anything in the review library. Once DOT staff are happy with the review comments, they then pass that on to the designer. DOT is then actively involved in negotiating any issues that may be raised by the participants. When you are a reviewer, you see all the files in the review comments library. You can see that T. Wyatt is the one who did the reviewing, DOT has rejected this file, approved this file. This is what that same library looks to the designer. All they see is the approved file. Now, versioning in Workspaces. Users may work in the library where they have access, or they can work offline in personal workspaces, moving the stuff back into the library. There are tools to prevent or allow concurrent editing. It is possible to have multiple people editing a Word document in some libraries. You will get a message that the document is being edited by the other person, and as you each save, you can see the work the other person is doing. You also have the ability to check out a document so that you're the only person that can modify it. We prefer if you use SharePoint versioning whenever possible during any revision process. Don't keep changing the file name for each revision. We can go back and look at previous versions if necessary, but this way, whoever is looking at the files is looking at the current version, or at least the current version that has been checked out by somebody else. If you check things out, you have the ability as an individual to check things out and make changes that nobody else can see until you check things back in. Now, moving files. For those of you who have done this before, it'll be old hat. The Windows Explorer view is only available through Internet Explorer. It's not available through Edge, it's not available through Chrome, it's not available through Firefox or Safari. We are not allowed to drag files between SharePoint browser windows. You can drag files into SharePoint browser windows, and it is possible in some browsers, not all, to drag files out of browser windows. Sometimes when you drag a file out of a browser window, you end up dragging the icon or the link out of the browser window. It looks like a file. You can click on it and it opens it, but it's actually opening the file in its original location, and you're actually creating a link in the new location instead of moving the file. So when you're clicking and dragging out of a browser, you may be surprised by what you get. Clicking on Open with Explorer from Internet Explorer will open Windows Explorer. And this basically repeats what I said earlier. So here's a demonstration of moving files between libraries. In this case, what we're going to do is move files out of the hydraulics library. And the first thing we'll do, incidentally, this is a different workstation, so the blue bullseye means a left button click. And this is Windows 8, incidentally. So we've set up a Windows Explorer view in the hydraulics library. Now we're going to the Review Comments library. Open the Windows Explorer library and move the files into the browser window. And this is the file. Notice that the scope has not been set in click and drag. You have to edit the properties in order to set the scope. Here is an opportunity for you to try that. Now, depending on the version of Windows that you're working with, you may not be able to click and drag out of the browser window as this is describing here. You may have to open up a Windows Explorer view of this library in order to get it out, get the file out. So you're going to be pulling a file from the From DOT library, moving it out, changing the name on your workstation. and then moving it from your workstation into the review comments library. So give that a go. Okay, some things to keep in mind. Document sets cannot be moved between libraries. You have to create a new document set in the destination. The review comments library at this point does not allow the creation of document sets. Properties do not follow the files to the new location. When you moved that file from .dot into your workstation and from your workstation into the review comments library, in each case the properties were stripped out. However, if you move a file into a library and overwrite the existing file, the previous file is not deleted, a new version is overlaid, and the properties remain. Now, there are times when you want to go in and change the properties when you put a new version in. Now, there's also a security bug. I don't know if you noticed, but the file I had you use is an old-style XLS file. For some reason, the current version of Excel type files are blocked from opening. You can store them, you can move them around, but you cannot open them within SharePoint. You have to open them from a Windows Explorer view. So we've done some moving files. Now let's take a look at some markup. Any file that is not an Office file must be opened from a Windows Explorer view. So in this case, if we're going to mark up a PDF file, we need to use, in this case, Acrobat Reader. And because this is a Windows Explorer view, we have to log in. And for those of you who don't know, the free Acrobat Reader does have the ability to edit and mark up documents. It actually creates a comment layer, which is later editable. And I'll show you just a few of the tools that are available in here. You can use any Acrobat editor you want. Free one's kind of nice to have. sit here and watch this, or we can move on. What I'd like you to do is to give that file move and markup a chance to work. Now remember, any file may be opened in Windows Explorer. This includes CAD files without external references. You can actually open a CAD file with external references, but you may end up breaking the file. Other non-Microsoft files, or Microsoft files you wish to open with non-default tools, if you want to use OpenOffice instead of Word to get into a spreadsheet or a Word document. Anytime you open a Windows Explorer view, the first time you open Windows Explorer view, it's going to ask you to re-log in just to verify who you are. If you click on the box to say remember my login, it should not ask you for that again until the next day, or you restart your browser, because it's apparently information that is stored with the browser and with Windows Explorer, and it's shared on your workstation. If you have saved it as a favorite, and I've mentioned that in other classes, the first time you open the file after logging in or restarting your browser directly from the favorite, you may be asked to log in as well. So we've covered moving files, we've covered file markup.